Welcome to Sutures and Cents, where Tegaderm meets Top Line and Surgiflow meets soft costs. In ambulatory surgery centers and hospital ORs, we talk clinical to business people and business to clinical people. I'm Mark Copeland. He's still Ryan Pistone, but he's on vacation this week. And we are Sutures and Cents. Now, for those of you who don't know much about the operating room, I'll ask you to think of the OR as an F1 vehicle. I'm partial to Max Verstappen and Red Bull, so let's think about that. So in this picture, Max is the surgeon. The car is the OR, and sterile processing, they're the pit crew. Along with anesthesia, the scrub nurse or scrub tech, and the circulator, and of course the surgeon, no one is more involved in that surgery than the sterile processing team. They decontaminate, wash, inspect, build, and sterilize the instruments used on all surgical cases. That Da Vinci robot that you see on billboards, sterile processing, reprocessed the arms on it. That implant that you or your loved one has in you, a total knee, total hip, spine implant, total shoulder. Sterile processing sterilize the instruments and in some case the implants that are designed to stay in you forever. And because today's Fraser suction tip or Bookwalter belly retractor is going to be used again tomorrow on another patient, what SPD does is mission critical to not only how well the patient does after surgery, but keeping that patient safe from infection. Today's guest on Sutures and Cents is Hank Balch. Hank Balch is the founder and president of Beyond Clean. He began his career in sterile processing in 2009, and he served in numerous roles, including system director for several SPD departments across the country. He's an award-winning sterile processing leader. He's twice been nominated for ISHM president. He's a founder of 2 statewide ISHM chapters. He's a conference speaker, and he's a well-known writer and blogger and social media leader in the sterile processing and perioperative services industry. His passion is seeing frontline sterile processing professionals equipped to fight dirty every instrument, every time. I think Hank Balch personifies the new face of sterile processing departments. He's fighting dirty, and he's doing it on social media. Let's talk to Hank. All right, Hank. I was telling you earlier, I think I first noticed you, it had to have been on LinkedIn, when I saw you use this term, weapon of mass microbial destruction. And I remember thinking, well, now here's a clever fella. So welcome to the show. Thank you for coming on.
Thank you, Cope. Yeah.
And please call me Cope. That's what my friends call me, and we're friends. So tell me, Hank, about sterile processing. What attracted it to you? It looked like about 14 or 15 years ago. And better yet, start by describing sterile processing to people who may be listening to this who don't know much about it.
Yeah, so sterile processing, really interesting career in healthcare and surgical services. I will get to some more of why it's so interesting maybe later when we talk about education, but it's a very unknown slice of what's happening in surgery. You know, people on the street, they know what a surgeon is, they know what a surgeon does for the most part, they know what nurses are, they know what nurses do. Even, you know, sometimes anesthesiologists, right, like they kind of get that, they put you to sleep. But you bring up sterile processing and it's like, do you make people sterile? Is that kind of what you're doing? And so I have found, you know, one of the most helpful ways to approach it, actually the Canadians kind of gave us this. They call the sterile processing services medical device reprocessing. And I think that's probably a better kind of phrase because it really gets at, okay, there's a reprocessing piece to this. Yes, for the most part, we're sterilizing all of the surgical instruments that are being used in surgery, but it's not just sterilization. There is a large disinfection a component to what we do, especially when you start talking about endoscopes and such. Plus, there's a lot of distribution part of our job. We pick all the surgical cases, instrumentation. Many times we pick the soft goods as well. But anywhere there is surgery being done, there's someone doing this role. Sometimes it is nurses that are moonlighting, surgical technologists that are, when they get done with the surgery, they kind of follow the trays down and they begin the sterile processing process. But in any of your larger facilities, you're going to have a dedicated sterile processing team. And yeah, we're the ones out there fighting dirty.
Yeah. And I saw you shortly after I saw, your first term, I then saw Fight Dirty. And that's when I was like, okay, all right, now I'm following this guy. Because whatever it is, he's got a good way with words. He's clever. And those terms are sticky. So I liked it. So what attracted you to it? How'd you end up doing this?
Yeah, so I'll give you the down and dirty, and then I'll give you maybe the more philosophical reason. So the down and dirty was I was getting married, and at that time I was working second shift at a Walmart in town, and I was stocking shelves. Which there's nothing wrong with that. I enjoy the job. Great career. I didn't realize it until I was working at Walmart that you can make $100K as a store director, and it's even more now. So there's definitely a path to growth to making six figures working at Walmart. But I wanted to do something different, and my father-in-law at that time wanted me to be doing something different if I was going to marry his daughter. So I asked around, had a buddy who got a job in supply chain materials management, and he said, Hank, there's this job in the hospital. You can work shift work. I was still in grad school at that point. They do benefits. You don't need any prior medical background. Do you want an interview? And I said, yes, I do. Now, the interesting part of that is that engagement actually broke off before I even got the job, or before I started the job. So I didn't end up marrying that girl anyways, but I got into sterile processing nonetheless.
I love hearing the background of how people got into things that they're in, and they're never. I don't know if you ever remember. It's an old movie, When Harry Met Sally, and they talk to these couples about how they met each other, and it's such interesting stories, and that's sort of what how people end up in sales is a lot like that many times. So nobody trains to be in it, but then all of a sudden you look up and you're in it. Right. I was looking at this earlier to sort of talk about the breadth of what you've done with Beyond Clean. Well, let me back up. So after seeing you write Fight Dirty, I saw you post something that you were moving to Lancaster, Pennsylvania, near me. And I remember going, hey, I got to meet you. You're interesting, right? I just can't. And I remember meeting you in Lidditz, and I remember saying to you, as is the way I talk to so often, what the heck is Beyond Clean? What are you doing? What is this thing? And I remember exactly what you said. You said, we're going to be the nexus of sterile processing. Probably should have said medical device reprocessing, I guess. But right. You said the nexus of it, right? And I remember saying, what's that mean? And you said, whether you're an employee, a vendor, a hospital, whatever, if you're looking to learn something about this or understand it, you said, we want people to come here. Right. Now, and I believe, by the way, you've achieved that. How did you come to that vision? And then we'll talk about all the interesting stuff I think you guys are doing and sterile processing. How'd you get that vision? And then how'd you get there?
Yeah, so I would say there's two primary reasons that happened the way that it did. Number one, when I got really started as a department manager in 2013, I got my first sterile processing manager job in Kentucky. I started looking around for resources as a new leader, saying, like, how do I do this thing? Because yesterday I was a tech, today I'm a manager, but I still know what I knew yesterday when I was a tech. There's nothing magical that happens there. And I looked around, and the resources were just not there, or the ones that were like extremely boring and traditional. It's like, you got a textbook or you got some webinars, and that was it in 2013. So as you kind of alluded to, I enjoy writing. I enjoy the power of language, and so I said, well, if there's nothing out there, even as a new leader, I'm gonna write about what I'm going through. I'm going to ask questions. Through LinkedIn was a primary place that I began blogging way back in 2013. So it's been 10 years now that I've been active here on LinkedIn. So I began doing that, and that never stopped my entire career as a manager, as a director, and even now as one of the co-founders of Beyond Clean. So that was number one, just a love of content and a realization that there wasn't enough of it out there for people like me who wanted to learn. But secondarily, and this again is just kind of life experience, back in 2016, 2017, my department had won an award, the Healthcare Purchasing News Sterile Processing Department of the Year Award. So we won that in 2016. We got on the cover of what used to be called the Communique magazine, but it's the HSPA. It's called Process Magazine, but we had a cover story on there about our approach to certification in our departments. And I got nominated to run for president of this national trade organization for sterile processing. Well, long story short, kind of dramatic little election. I ended up losing, but that summer, I got contacted by a guy who had become my co-founder, Justin Poulin, on LinkedIn. And he said, Hank, I've been reading your stuff, been watching your stuff. People are talking about, you've got some ideas out there. Do you want to start a podcast? Now, we can kind of, if you want to talk about that later, that's fine. But what had happened there is I had a lot of passion, a lot of purpose that was pointed toward this trade organization because I wanted to do big things. That was the biggest player in town. And everything was kind of focused on that, and then it got pulled away. And then I was sitting there that summer like, what the heck am I going to do now, right? Like, how do I impact the industry? And then, wouldn't you know, the network on LinkedIn brought it together, and man, like it's a whole other world now since 2017 when we launched Beyond Clean. So it's been kind of crazy. Yeah,
I was looking on the website for Beyond Clean of Justin's texts or LinkedIn direct messages to you. You guys going back and forth. June of messages. 2017. Yeah. And it's funny. We had been selling into sterile processing since early 2014, and I got to know Justin from being at CASP meetings and local meetings, and he was always so interested, curious, and wanted to learn more. And at first you're kind of like, why is this guy asking me so much about this stuff, right? And I just got to know him pretty well, and I remember, and then seeing you guys get together, I'm like, all right, well, that's when I think I reached out to you at that point. But yeah, so 2017 is the sort of the genesis. It's 2018 I think is when you sort of maybe officially kicked off somewhere right in there. So what are you trying to, obviously, look, Beyond Clean's the nexus of sterile processing, but to what goal? Because I think I know, but I want to hear what you guys want to accomplish. You have a very good team. What are you guys trying to accomplish?
So I'm not bringing up Elon Musk to compare myself to Elon Musk, but I want to compare the vision. If you were to ask Elon Musk, like, what are you trying to do out there, Elon? Well, he's trying to do a lot of things, right? He's freaking going to space. He's building electric cars. Like, he's taking over Twitter. Like, this guy's doing
He's digging holes. He's digging holes in the ground, and yeah.
Who knows what he's done? Those are just the things that we know about, right? Like, who knows what else he's doing? Well, it's kind of similar, right? When people ask us, what is the ultimate goal of Beyond Clean? Well, one of the things is, like, we want to solve gaps in the industry that are clear. Everybody knows about it, but we have the particular skill set to solve it. So a lot of that comes down to gaps in education, gaps in networking, gaps in content, especially on the social media in the digital space. And we do that, not just by kind of going out there solving ourselves, but actually creating that synergy, that nexus of everybody else that cares about doing those things, and then bringing them together to do those things on and through and even outside of our platforms. So the short answer is we want to continue to innovate into the sterile processing industry, whatever that looks like tomorrow, next month, next year. And I mean, we've done that crazy ways, right? Like we started as a podcast in 2017, but we have scaled up into everything from micro credentials. We've published books. We've done documentary series out there. We do some killer live events. We do a ton of virtual training events. You name it, we publish music albums about sterile processing. I mean, we are freaking all over the place. And that's kind of why I say like that Elon Musk kind of approach is we're just out there doing what needs to be done in the moment. We're a small team, but we're mighty, and it's a really exciting place to be.
Well, it's I was looking at some of your podcast topics, right? Just scrolling through, and by the way, I did listen to Mark Graban today.
Oh yeah,
just in case you're on the way back from Philadelphia. As a matter of fact, and I was writing off like, here's one of your podcasts, data analysis. Another one, avoiding failure culture, right? Another, compensation and salary, which is an enormous topic. Another one was quality versus productivity debates, right? And I was laughing. That's just 5 of them in the last 45 days. Right. Like, that's a broad breadth of topics, right, all of which sort of fall into those gaps I think you were talking about, right? And they all fall under that one you were talking about, education. Because there has been, I agree with you. I can't tell you how many sterile processing departments I went in 2019, let's say, saying, hey, do you guys listen to the Beyond Clean podcast? You guys follow them? And 9 out of 10 times I got a, what's that now? Who? You know? And I would tell people, I'd write it down, Beyond Clean. I think you should look into it because I think it's a really good, it's becoming an excellent resource.
Right.
Now, if I say, hey, are you familiar with them? It's reverse. 9 out of 10 are like, oh yeah, I love that stuff. I like those guys. And which is pretty fast, considering there's a global pandemic in the middle of that, which may have helped.
That's
the
got
platform.
its own story. Yeah.
Yeah, right. But I think when I look at what you guys do, you educate. Mm-hmm. You educate and give perspective, and it's not just yours. That's where your platform comes in, and it is desperately needed. And I'm talking to the preacher of the choir of how desperate it is. But like, tell me why you think, I mean, I think we both know the answer. Why do you think sterile processing is underappreciated in hospitals and surgery centers? Mm-hmm. Because it's actually illogical to me.
Yeah, a ton of different reasons. So I'll just throw out a handful here that I think deserve some extra attention. So we just publish, one of the things we do at Beyond Clean is we do research. We published a peer-reviewed journal article just last month. The largest survey ever done in the industry, talking about economics, talking about career growth in sterile processing. And one of the things it surfaced was there is a clear lack of a standardized pathway of career growth in sterile processing. 2 ways. How do you get into sterile processing? Once you're in, how do you grow in sterile processing? If you look at the rest of surgical services, it's pretty straightforward. If you want to be a surgical tech, you go to surgical tech school, you graduate, you get your job, and then you can grow within in that little career ladder that's in the OR. Same thing for nurses, same thing with doctors. Clearly, right, you go to med school, you do your specialty, etc. Then you come down to sterile process. You're like, hey, how'd you get in this job? Oh, I was working at Walmart last week, and now I'm here. Here we go. And how do you become a manager? Well, 100 million different ways. Yeah, just good luck. Right time, right place. Here you go. And so all of that dynamic, definitely plays into a very credentialed and educated peers in our in surgical services, and then we're kind of looking at ourselves like, well, do we belong here, right? Are we the only outsiders, right?
Yeah.
So that's part of it. The second part, which this is just how it happened in construction, but we're often separated from everything else that's going on in the OR, right? So the nurses are up there, the surgical techs are up there, the surgeons obviously are up there. They meet down the hall in the break room, but they're there. And then the one key player in this whole puzzle ain't there, ain't anywhere to be seen, completely hidden in the basement. So I think there's a lot of things, that kind of play in to this dynamic of, are they really important? And do we really need that voice at the table when we're making these big decisions on how to improve surgery?
It's interesting. There's a guy I learned a lot of sterile processing from. I don't know if you've ever met him, John Cross, and he's at one of the UPMC facilities around here. Mm-hmm. And John was one of the guys when I was bringing spine stuff into Harrisburg Hospital. He was one of the guys, like, making sure it was done on time. And he's that guy that everybody in the department sort of learns from, and including me. And John has told me, he works at a different hospital within UPMC now, where sterile processing is basically right next to the OR. And you almost can't tell where one starts and one ends. They sit in the same lunchroom. And John has said to me a couple times, it's a lot harder to get pissed at people who are sitting in the same lunchroom with you. Yep. Like, you tend to treat them with more respect when you know who they are and their kids are in Little League and you talk to them about your favorite baseball team or whatever. And I said, if you designed a hospital, he's like, oh, no doubt about it. It's exactly how I designed it. Right. And I do think like that couple of floors separation it didn't help a bias that's already in place. I felt like coming from the OR, right? I didn't think about you guys coming and going, do we belong here? I hadn't really thought about that. How do you get over that? How do you get past that?
Well, the two things I've seen most successful, just from a practical standpoint, right? So, like, there's questions on, like, how do you change the industry dynamic, and we're definitely involved in that, and I think, like, we're a key player in that. But there's a practical side of, what do I do on Monday morning when I get back into work, Hank? Like, how can I start fixing this problem? So the two things are, it starts with leadership. If you've got an OR manager director that just turns a blind eye to your team treating SPD like crap, well, surprise, surprise, many of them will treat them like crap, and the culture will just begin to be that ethos. So then when you get new nurses and new techs in, when they get frustrated or mad or yelled at by the doctor, hey, it's just normal. Everyone yells at SPD, right? It's always SPD's fault. And that comes down to these OR managers and directors. So I cut them no slack. If you want to be in leadership, you got to... It starts and it ends with your office, Mr. and Mrs. Director. So you got to own the culture breakdown. That's also true for sterile processing, right? So one of the things that I did in my departments when I became a new leader was I sat everybody down and said, hey, I don't care what they have said to you in the past. I don't care what they have done. I don't care what they continue to say to you. Judgment begins here at our house, and we're going to start speaking and acting respectfully no matter what. Now, if you get crapped on, if you get yelled at, if you get thrown under the bus, I will take it from there. I'll go talk to that person. I'll talk to that surgeon. I'll talk to the OR manager. But I never want to hear anything from my team that you're contributing to the drama. And if you can start it at either one of those departments, right? It can start in either one. But if you get that level of ownership, a lot of that crap will stop. That's number one. Two, the other thing, though, that you can do practically is really driving that level of service excellence and career growth amongst your team in a way that is transparent and visible to your OR customer. So what I mean by that, like the best way that I've seen do that is through department newsletters. We began publishing department newsletter once a month. You just write, hey, who's getting certified down there? What are the new process improvement projects that we're putting in play? what are the new tray, like the new tray updates that we're doing? Like, what is going on in sterile processing that's positive, so that all these nurses, all these techs, all these surgeons, the only time they hear about you is not when, oh, you're missing an indicator, or oh, there's a hole in the wrap. Now they get to see, oh man, they're down there, they're getting certified. Like some of them graduating from college. Hey, they're improving like this scope process. 100 million good things go on in SPD every day, but if you don't tell your customers, they're just going to assume, well, what they see is what they get. And, many times it's just the problems that they see.
Well, it's interesting. You can't demand respect if you don't respect yourself. And that's sort of what you just described. Like you walked in and said, hey, we respect ourselves starting now, starting today. And then we're going to show how productive we are. It's funny because if people don't see what you're doing, they don't know what you're doing. And I'll be honest, most human bias is, I don't think they're doing anything. Like that's that third in anything. You should see it in sales. I mean, like I haven't heard from that guy in a while. Is he actually working? Right? And it's funny. It's just natural. So that's how you engendered that initially and early on. And I've heard you talk about that. And I think it's still hard for folks to do, but it's less hard because I think people like you help them model it and show it. And I do like when you say you hold the OR manager or supervisor to that. Well, that's because you respect what you're doing. Yeah. Right? I mean, because if you didn't, you wouldn't. One of the things I like about people like Hank Balch is that they identify a problem or a gap or a need, and they start solving it. They don't complain or moan. They just get to work. You cannot have a high-performing operating room without a high-performing sterile processing department. It's impossible, and frankly, it's unsafe to patients. If this podcast gets one surgeon or one nurse or one administrator to walk into a sterile processing department and introduce themselves and say, hey guys, tell me about what you do. Mission accomplished. Because remember, all bleeding stops eventually. This has been Sutures and Sense.